Looking to stock up on high quality Ayurvedic herbs? I've partnered with two of my trusted sources, Kerala Ayurveda and Gary and Son, to offer you 20% off their entire range of authentic products. From classical formulas to single herbs and seasonal must haves, these are staples I use in my own practice. Use code Ojas Oasis for Kerala Ayurveda, Ojas Oasis 20 for Gary and Son. Links are in the show notes. Supporting your healing journey just got a little bit easier. In Ayurveda, nourishment isn't only about what we take in for the body, but also what we offer the heart. That's why we're honored to share Aura Cacao, a ceremonial grade cacao we've chosen as a dharmic partner for the Ojas Oasis community. Aura Cacao supports meditation, heart-opening rituals, and moments of conscious presence. As an exclusive gift for our listeners, use Ojas Oasis 20 for 20% off, and you'll find the link in the show notes. Welcome to Ojas Oasis, the podcast where ancient wisdom meets the modern being. I'm your host, Sasha Brashadsky, Ayurvedic doctor and guide on this journey into the heart of holistic wellness. Some people build companies, others answer a calling. Today's guest is someone who followed a deep, soul-level pull toward one sacred plant, cacao. I'm honored to be joined by Jonas Wonka, founder of Aura Cacao, whose journey with cacao began not as a business idea, but as a relationship. In this conversation, Jonas shares how cacao found him, what it means to work with this plant as a teacher rather than a commodity, and how ceremonial cacao can support emotional healing, presence, and heart connection in our modern, overstimulated world. We explore cacao through both spiritual and Ayurvedic lenses, including cacao versus coffee, doshic considerations, and how to work with cacao in a way that builds ojas rather than depletes it. This episode is an invitation to return to ritual, intention, and relationship with plants, with ourselves, and with the heart. Let's get to our chat. I love this. Jonas Wonka. Welcome to Ojas Oasis.
Thank you.
It's so fun to connect with friends of friends, but also fellow dharmic founders and creators. And I was so excited when I figured out that I actually had someone in connection with you and that I could reach out to you directly. I got so excited. And I was so happy when you agreed to come on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Wonka can't be your real last name.
It's not. It's
Okay.
just playful.
It's fun. Okay, cool. But you go by Jonas Wonka now at this point.
I mean, just online.
Yeah, okay.
My
Well,
real name's out there, but it's just a playful, reclaiming that Wonka spirit and making it modern day and bringing it into the cacao world.
I love
Out of
it.
the candy world.
Out of the candy world, yes. Well, I love to always begin these deep dives with an invitation to share your story behind what led you into this passion toward cacao in general. Like, what was there a specific moment in your life where you had a life-changing cup of cacao, or did you have an experience with it in another environment that made you just fall in love with this and really want to bring it to the world?
Yeah, it was a series of events, I would say. The very seed moment was in Oaxaca, Mexico. I was traveling down there after I finished graduate school. And I mean, Oaxaca is such a magical place of so many indigenous traditions and artwork. And so that was our reason for going down at the moment, my girlfriend and I at the time. And we ended up in this small little village doing a homestay. This village in particular, Tenochtitlan de Valle, is known for its hand-woven rugs. They build their own looms, they dye their own yarn. They go from literally scratch to these intricate rugs. Like Every adult knows like 20 or 30 designs by memory. It's absolutely incredible. So we were just kind of there studying, observing, and while there we're introduced to an elder who was showing us kind of just all the plants that they work with in their permaculture garden, because I was also studying permaculture at the time. And she's like, "Hey, have you ever made chocolate before?" And she kind of already knew the answer because she was walking to the pantry while she was asking, and she was getting out the cacao beans. And so we ended up roasting them over an open fire and hand peeling them in her courtyard and then grinding them down to make a cacao paste. And, it was fairly gritty by modern standards, like not very refined, but like we made it with our hands. It was so cool. I had never thought about the process of making chocolate before, and to be like that in touch with the aromas, the actual seeds, where the cacao comes from, it just like, and like it had this spirit and energy to it. It was there was something in it that pretty much all chocolate I had eaten up to that point didn't have, because it wasn't over processed, right? And so that spirit of the cacao could come through, and I just felt it as this like aliveness and this enthusiasm, and that like came into my life through that first batch. And yeah, I just became so curious because I have an engineering background, and I was like, oh, what is like modern chocolate making missing that this very simple indigenous process, this that's been passed down for literally thousands of years, has. Like, how are they, whoever's making chocolate now, missing some of the wisdom from this process? And can I replicate this process back at home, because that's so good, I want to share it with everybody I know. And so that was kind of the seed question.
Leave it to an engineer to figure out that magic piece. Always. It's that curiosity that will get you to the places that a lot of people wouldn't even think.
I did this cool program in engineering school called Design for Extreme Affordability, or was involved with a lot of people in that program. And one of the ways it challenged us as like Western trained engineers is going to countries where people have very few resources and actually asking them questions about how they live their lives, like what they need, as opposed to what we think they need, right? From a humanitarian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really trained me to ask questions and to really value local knowledge and process, which I wouldn't take as a given necessarily for an engineering education. But I was fortunate enough to have that, and my previous work in solar was doing that. And so I kind of came to the chocolate making with the same lens, of not like the Western modern chocolate making tradition is better, it's just different. And so valuing her knowledge equally, and seeing like how could they meet and what can we actually learn from each other. So that was kind of the seed as well for wanting to explore and share that process more.
So fun. I definitely can relate to that moment of feeling activated by something and really just wanting to go down the rabbit hole. That's what happened with me and Ayurveda in 2016, in my first yoga teacher training. The exact same thing. I was like, Ayurveda? Whoa, okay. Why do I feel like I'm remembering that? Why do I feel like that is not the first time I've heard this? And this is not the first time I've learned this? Like all of it felt like, oh, I'm remembering it from before. And then there's no turning back once you fall in love with a medicine or a lineage.
Our first wholesale account was actually an Ayurvedic store and spa in the town where I was living at the time in Sebastopol. Um, so I'll forever
Oh,
remember
I
that.
love
That was such a
that.
big milestone.
Is it Diana? Is it the
Mhm.
Diana Center? Ah, amazing. Small
Yeah, and
world.
of course they understood, what we were doing and why it was important.
Of course. You can feel it in the actual energy, even just like holding one of the packages. You're like, oh, whoa, there's energy around this. There's some Shakti around the name, first of all, aura, and then the whole, the packaging itself feels like it has an aura to it. So there's definitely something special that you've created. So I wanted to get into cacao as a revered and sacred plant. And it has been revered for thousands of years. But what do you feel as a modern culture we have gotten kind of wrong about cacao or forgotten about cacao? And what do you think it's here to help us remember?
I mean, modern culture has forgotten that cacao is a sacred plant, right? It over processes it so that it pretty much tastes the same every time, and it adds a lot of sugar to it, which interferes with the body's ability to absorb it. And it comes from supply chains that are exploitative, right? They're not honoring of people or
Mm.
ecosystems and lands. So it's almost like, oh, and then the classical hot chocolate's made in milk, which act like dairy milk, which also inhibits some of the uptake of cacao's compounds. So pretty much at every turn, we're doing it wrong per se.
Doing it
It's
wrong.
not that I won't enjoy
Yeah.
a good hot chocolate, right? But like, of course, ethically sourced with the cacao powder and such that we use. But cacao is a amazing tool of connection to the natural world. And because we can't grow it here in the north, it's also an essential point of relationship to ecosystems and peoples that are far away. And so, we don't have to continue working with the supply chain that we've inherited, which is a very old model, right? It's a 500-year-old model. The Spanish came to Central America and they brought back cacao, and it was the beginning of this model of just exploitation of tropical peoples and goods. That's not just for cacao, that's for coffee, that's for timber, that's for corn. It's actually kind of the same pattern across many different industries. And it hasn't changed that much. We used to use slavery. Now the price of cacao is so low that it doesn't really support a good living. But we know better than that now, and I think a lot of people who enjoy chocolate also want it to come from a good place. But the industry interests are just so entrenched, and, they're just resisting change. And they're also based off of a model where chocolate's really cheap, where it's not valued. So to build sustainable supply chains, we also have to educate about the true value of cacao. And what better way to help people value it by having them understand just how actually physically good it is for them, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. It's really well rounded. And so by shifting the patterns of consuming chocolate, then all of a sudden we can actually support regenerative supply chains that are supporting indigenous communities. It's an incredible tool for rainforest conservation, and creating a pattern interrupt in this relationship that's fundamentally been based in exploitation of other people's. And so it takes both work on the supply chain side and on the education side. But I mean, the amazing thing is when we make these shifts, we can have some of the best chocolate in the world that's like alive. It's actually good for us. We don't need to feel guilty about having it. And it becomes a conduit for our relationship with the world, right? When we slow down and pause and bring gratitude and intention to our lives on a daily basis with our cup of cacao, it changes everything. Like the cacao is just an invitation for it. And I would say broader than just what does society have wrong about chocolate, it's like a lot of people in the modern world are struggling with disconnection. They feel disconnected from their ancestry. They feel disconnected from their communities. They feel disconnected from the natural world around them. And cacao, as a tool of connection, will help begin shift those things. It takes time. It's not something that happens overnight, but it's an amazing ally for that.
There are so many questions that I want to ask in response to that. But first, I think I want to start with just the medicinal benefits of cacao. And from a physiological perspective, you kind of just hinted at it, but how does cacao impact mood and focus and emotional openness? And how do you see it supporting our health?
Cacao actually has many well studied neurotransmitters and neuromodulators in it. So it actually literally shifts our brain chemistry. There's serotonin, dopamine precursors. There's anandamide, norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is classically referred to as the joy molecule, anandamide, the bliss molecule. Phenylethylamine helps with states of relaxation. dopamine, serotonin, help with resistance to stress and just overall feeling of well-being. So like, it's not candy in that you're popping it for like a sweet treat, right? It's actually affecting your brain chemistry. And that's like a shift in understanding how we work with it. And the cool thing is, in addition to those neuromodulators, cacao has the neuro reuptake inhibitors for those same neuromodulators, meaning that you don't just get a fleeting, like 10-minute feeling of joy, but like it can actually last for a while. And again, cacao is so wide ranging. Like I just mentioned 5 molecules of a couple hundred active compounds that are in cacao. And so sometimes people will have cacao and expect a certain result. But cacao really, sometimes when you're first having cacao, it's just working on fundamentals, like getting your baseline up. And, you're not ready to have whatever ecstatic experience. It's totally fine, just keep showing up to that cacao. And over time, I've had many, many different experiences of cacao. Sometimes cacao puts me to sleep because I need to sleep. Those same molecules, some of them that I mentioned are quite relaxing. And so I'll sleep instead of getting stimulated. Cacao also has stimulant compounds. So cacao's effects are very wide ranging. I just like to mention that people, and this comes into like the ceremonial relationship with cacao, right? As if we're coming into our connection with cacao with an expectation of a certain outcome, then we're not like truly relating with it. We're actually kind of consuming it for a certain goal or desire. But if we're really coming to it open and curious about the outcome, that's where the real magic can happen. And then cacao will show up exactly as it can best.
Feeling drained, stressed, or stuck in old patterns? Panchakarma is Ayurveda's ultimate reset, clearing toxins, balancing your doshas, and restoring your vitality from the inside out. At Soham Healing Resort, every detail is designed for your transformation. Personalized therapies, nourishing meals, and deep rest in a serene sanctuary. As an Ojas Oasis listener, you'll receive $500 off your Panchakarma retreat with code OJASOASIS PK2025. These retreats book quickly and often far in advance, so don't wait to reserve your place today. Visit sohamhealing.com/panchakarma, and you'll also find the link and code waiting for you in the show notes. It sounds like you're leading us into the next question that I had around cacao ceremony. So for someone new to ceremonial cacao, someone who's never experienced it, knows nothing about it, what would you say are like 2 simple ways that they can begin practically working with cacao in a sacred practice rather than just consuming it, like you said, as another thing that we use for stimulation or pleasure?
Yeah, if it's just me, I like to use the word cacao ritual. I think that tends to be a little bit more accessible to people. And I'll share with you how I got started because I started making these batches of really high grade cacao and having them. And nobody had told me about ceremonial cacao. I didn't have that word in my vocabulary. I didn't even know that cacao could affect my neurochemistry or anything of that, right? So, like, just imagine walking into connection with what's right here in my cup, just with a total blank slate. I like to be in nature. So I would take my cup of cacao out into the redwood forest that was near where Aura was. And I remember I would just like sit down with a tree and drink my cacao. And I remember one time specifically, it was like a beautiful afternoon out and the golden sunlight was just filtering through the trees. And I just became really present. I just really took in the beauty that was all around me in a way that like startled me. And I had this moment of being like, wait, there's no psychedelic mushrooms in here because I was familiar with that experience. This is just cacao. I didn't know cacao could do this. Like, oh, does anybody else know cacao can do this? I just got so curious. But I had my journal with me. And so I immediately began journaling, like, whoa, here's here's like how I was feeling a moment ago. And now I'm like feeling really peaceful and serene. And this is so beautiful. And so I just began sitting with myself and tracking how my day shifted as a result of my cup of cacao. And I began journaling how I went in. to my cup of cacao and then how a few hours later I was feeling. And that way, without anybody else telling me what cacao does, I just began understanding how it was working specifically with me. And I think
Mm.
that's, this day and age when we have access to so much information, that personal relationship with the cacao is kind of like the ultimate authority, because then if somebody would ask me about it, I could say, like, this is how it works for me, and this is what I've learned from working with it. And to me, it felt just quite natural to bring gratitude into the experience. Like, I'd have these beautiful experiences. Of course, I'd be grateful. So I began starting my rituals off with gratitude. I'd also, in my permaculture training, learned of various indigenous traditions that really start off their meetings and their gathering with gratitude. There's beautiful writings about how gratitude feeds the whole web of life.
Mm.
It was something that I wanted to practice more because I realized that
Mhm.
gratitude doesn't come to me as readily as perhaps it could. So I began
Mm.
training myself in gratitude with each cup of cacao. And then I also, at that point in my life, did understand the power of intention and setting clear intentions. That actually came to me from a dance training and practice that I did. So I combined those things. I just put together gratitude, intention, and this journaling practice of really observing how the cacao worked with my body. And from that place began developing a relationship with cacao. In terms of like setting intentions and working with cacao, it's like I would just have conversations kind of with myself, with the cacao, however you view it. But it was just kind of this inner like journaling and reflection process that would happen with each cup of.
And if someone were to want to host I know you said the word ritual feels more tangible or less foreign to us because we all certainly in the West have a morning ritual with many of us have a ritual of some kind, but especially around, I would say coffee is the obvious predominant attachment that we have in our morning ritual. It is stimulating, and I think a lot of people rely on coffee to start their day for so many different reasons to go to the bath, of course, digestion, but also many people are chronically just fatigued and plowing through that and pushing through that. And coffee is giving them the idea that they have this energy that's actually not there. So it's like mimicking energy versus it's not actually giving you anything, but it's tricking your body into thinking that it has something that it's not actually cultivating or
Mhm.
preserving. So, not to hate on coffee because I love coffee, by the way, just for the record, I love coffee. And do I think we have culturally like an actual real serious problem with our rituals and attachments with excessive amounts of coffee, especially when we probably our nervous systems could use a break every now and again. And that's the question that's leading me into how cacao could possibly be could help us move away from that relationship in our morning rituals because I think coffee also has a lot of side effects that are not great, like anxiety and adrenal depletion, nervous system burnout. So, how how does cacao differ from coffee physiologically, energetically, and in the way that it meets the nervous system?
Yeah, great. So, gosh, I have a lot to say on that topic, and yeah, I can also relate personally. I'll start with saying that the primary stimulant molecule in coffee is caffeine. It's a nervous system stimulant, as you alluded to. The primary stimulant molecule in cacao is actually theobromine, which is a cardiac stimulant. So the energy boost is more of an embodied energy. You feel kind of like if you feel where the energy is coming from, it's less up here and more like down here. The time release of the theobromine is also it's not as high of a peak and it lasts for much longer. So you'll have like much more like steady energy throughout the day as opposed to like a quick boost that's kind of like can be intense and then you come down from it and then you feel the slump again and go for that second cup, right? Cacao actually does have caffeine in it too. It has maybe 35 milligrams of caffeine, which is a lot less than a cup of coffee. But because of those hundreds of other compounds that the cacao also have, and the cacao butter, which is kind of like bulletproofing a coffee, it's a natural fat, that caffeine tends to be very downregulated. It's within the range of like, options that I would say that cacao has for working with your body, but it's really well balanced. And, I would say anybody who's like really sensitive to caffeine, like I'm super sensitive to caffeine. I don't have a problem with the caffeine in cacao. And it was confused me for a long time that cacao even had caffeine in it because I'm like, I would notice. I'm so sensitive. But it's really all those other molecules that balance it. You really can't even compare a milligram of caffeine in coffee to a milligram of caffeine in cacao. It's just not a one-to-one comparison.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in terms of stimulus, like we all love stimulants. I think they play an important role. These days, I tend to think of it as having options as being the best choice, right? When coffee's our only option, we get really dependent on it. We get stuck in a rut. If cacao's our only option, we also enter a dependency on it, even though it's gentler, right? And what that dependency does is it takes us out of that place of true relationship with it. And then we're back in a consumptive pattern, right? So even if you're relying on cacao every single day and you might not actually listen for that, like, no, today's not the day for cacao, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have any other options. So that's why I like to have, I do a very like weak home brew of coffee for myself for specific times, because what I love about having my cacao ritual is then now it also gives me the choice to be in coffee ritual very intentionally. So yeah, I can come to coffee for very specific reasons now, and I actually really love coffee. Coffee is a
So do I.
beautiful tradition, right?
Yeah.
But I also have, I have coffee, I have tea, I have cacao, I have matcha. There's a whole range of options that each day I can come to and see what's needed, suited.
Mm-hmm.
But cacao, I will say, is amazing in that it won't support you pushing yourself beyond your limits, right? So unlike caffeine, which is just kind of like a jolt regardless, like cacao won't support an unsustainable lifestyle. Like it will gradually nudge you towards getting more sleep, towards making those changes in your lifestyle that are more sustainable so that you're not constantly burnt out. And that's some deep work. Often that's shifting lifestyle choices and patterns, looking at unquestioned, assumptions that you've made in your life. So if you're ready for it, cacao will support a whole cascading level of changes so that you can relate to just energy and stimulus in a different way.
I love that. That's a very different answer than the one that I was expecting, which was, yeah, let's replace coffee with cacao across the board. So I'm so happy that there is a place, you feel that there still is a place for coffee in our lives. If it's just like with anything in Ayurveda, just to give it an Ayurvedic lens, it's really about how you use the plant,
It's
right?
about how you use it.
How you use it. It's the consciousness.
I will say, like, personally, and I think for a lot of people, because of the consistent or frequent use with coffee, going cold turkey on coffee to kick the caffeine addiction and have the support of cacao for a while is often helpful as a reset tool, right?
Right.
For myself, actually, I watched my mom drink like several pots of black coffee a day just to function. So as a kid, I was like, "Oh my god, that stuff is
Ooh.
poison. Stay away from it. Like, don't get addicted like that." Right. So I've always actually had a pretty cautious relationship with coffee, and that's made me very sensitive to coffee to the point that often it was very uncomfortable for me to even have a small amount of coffee. And it's actually only been in like the last year or so. And I was in Paris, and, it's like so enticing to go to a cafe and have a croissant and a cup of coffee in the morning. And, there's
You
just this
got to
whole
do it.
culture
It's
around it.
just
You
you
have
when
to
in
do it.
Rome. Come on. You
And I like, of course, I love the smell of coffee, and I've always been attracted to it. But it was there that I realized that I could have small amounts of coffee and like use it for like productivity sessions. Like I prefer to drink, when I drink my coffee, I prefer to not be around other people
Mm.
and actually like focus on some creative work. And that then becomes a very sacred space. And so I've begun welcoming in the coffee in that way for specific intentional purposes.
The way that you're actually speaking about that ritual reminds me a lot about the way that you approach having your cacao. It's the same thing. You can literally take that same approach with anything you're consuming, whether it's a beverage or a food or any other stimuli, and yeah, begin to live more consciously, intentionally. And I think that that consciousness is slowly becoming more common, but there's a lot of noise to break through to get that to be the new cultural norm.
It really is. And I think cacao in particular is an amazing teacher in the slowing down, in the relational aspect of like actually creating a ritual, right? Like I would, if I had been drinking coffee, I would not come to that coffee ritual, right? I think cacao showed me what's possible in terms of my relationships there, including coffee, and then helped me kind of welcome in coffee in a way that works. And is grounded and anchored in really how I mean you think about the coffee supply chain just like the cacao supply chain. There's so much work that goes into it. You know, it's a total shame to rush through the moment and the experience of it or to be
Oh,
distracted. You know, it's like
we're so removed from it. We're so removed from that aspect to all of our food, truly.
yeah,
All the farming, all the hard work behind the scenes. We are just not near that at all. So we totally take it for granted.
yeah. I was
It's
just in
easy.
the chocolate factory this weekend, just helping get some holiday orders out and just being, you know, putting all the orders together, like helping package the packets of cacao, like I was like, wow, this is so much work. You know, it's like even me being around it, just being on the production line, I just like see how much effort goes into it. And you know, people are like, oh, this is more expensive. And it's like, well, yes, we're properly valuing all of the work that goes into it. We're not stealing from other places so that, you know, you could have a $2 candy bar. I would say the the problem of it being expensive is not the good itself being expensive, but actually us not paying people enough to afford things. You know,
Mm.
it kind of becomes a more systemic, like what's our economic ecosystem valuing? How's it supporting people?
Right. People are willing to spend a lot of money on other things, but they don't realize the price of something should be comparable to the value of what it's bringing to your life, as with anything. So I'm glad that you touched on that aspect of when you're spending more, like on a premium product, you're supporting all the people that are working behind the scenes to creating something really, truly of high quality and high value. I think quality is actually a really important topic that perhaps we can dive into as well, because I think that Ora cacao is probably one of the highest quality cacaos on the market. And that is quite an accomplishment. I can imagine that having an ethically based company in a capitalist market is not the easiest thing to always stick to. So can you speak on that a bit? Like the challenges, but the fact that you've stayed loyal to that intention and that ethical way of doing business.
Sure. I like the word qualitarian. I was just going to say as, you know, it's like we're seeking quality regardless of where it is, you know, and maybe it's less is more, but there are things of high quality. So with Aura, the cacao was so special to me. I knew that I couldn't take any shortcuts. That my relationship with cacao would not let me take any shortcuts. You know, that's not what it was about. And along with that, I had a very healthy skepticism of taking outside investment into the company that was seeking a certain return from the cacao, right? And you know, food is not a super high margin business because we're trying to provide food to people at a reasonable cost and pay everybody well along the way. And food companies, though, you know, are like when if you take investment in a food company, that investor is going to want a return of a certain amount that tends to be a lot more than the food company can actually reasonably give. And so the danger with taking investment is it's like both a fast track to scale and growth, but then, I mean, 9 out of 10 food companies that I've seen have then had to sell out to a big conglomerate and lose most of their values because they're the only ones that can give the valuation that the investor wants. So from the beginning, I was super committed to actually growing slowly and not growing outside of our means and just letting Cacao show us the way and grow the business organically. And we took, we made many kind of twists and turns along the way, changing strategy. Like I actually made chocolate bars at first. Had I taken investment for chocolate bars, those investors might not even have let me shift to ceremonial cacao because they didn't understand it. They wouldn't have let me close all my wholesale account for chocolate bars, to do an online business. So those early years of entrepreneurship, I just made a lot of changes. It was good that I wasn't investor backed at that point, and it's challenging. I had to be very bootstrappy and creative and like just keeping the doors open and really cut down my personal living costs and things like that. But it gave me freedom. It made me not have the stress of reporting to investors, managing money that of much larger figures or numbers than I really knew how to manage well, and kind of come into those questions as the business was ready to. And so that way we've been able to just go slowly, stay in relationship with Cacao and like let the Cacao guide our growth. So we still haven't taken outside investment. And I think there's not many companies that do that these days. And the ones that do are some of my role models because I think that independence and autonomy, it also requires you to build a sustainable company right from the beginning, right? And so you're really looking at your costs and every decision is based off of like, okay, we have to operate without making massive losses every single month.
Mhm.
So it's just a different relationship to the flow of capital. And yeah, I think just with one of these like sacred medicines of the earth, it's really important to honor it with that and let it show the way. And part of that was also building our own manufacturing facility. That's a big way of how we sustain the quality that we do. Because my feeling of working with the cacao was that, most of the chocolate factories that are out there, they're not used to looking at cacao the way that we do. So how could they possibly transform it when they're not looking at it as something that's alive? And so we very much, wanted to work with it every single step very, very closely and also custom develop our processes, do things that were pushing the envelopes of how we manufacture in terms of like low temperature process and like, just actually paying attention to the materials used everywhere in the manufacturing process and so on and so forth. And also again, letting the cacao guide the manufacturing. Like the whole chocolate factory is built off of me sitting with a cup of cacao and being like, okay, how do we do this? How do we do this better? Okay, now we just learned this. Is there something else we can do to keep improving our quality and such over time?
It's such a challenge. I mean, wow. First of all, I bow to you and the sticking to your integrity and sticking to your values. It's the most difficult part of being a dharmic entrepreneur is balancing the core of why you're building what you're building, because that's really the fuel, that's the passion behind all of your hard work, is that you want everyone to experience this amazing product. I say product, in a business sense, but it's also a medicine. You want people to have this in their life. You want people to have access to high quality medicine that you love. It's a love, really. And I relate to that because I have that same love with the Ayurvedic lineage. And it's the main reason why this podcast exists is it's a way to bring this knowledge of Ayurveda is everything. I mean, Ayurveda is the science of and knowledge of life. And there is nothing which is not medicine in Ayurveda. It's all about how we use it and the dosage, which is going to lead me. It's kind of my segue into the next question around how much cacao do we drink, and doshically, you know, Vata's is this a tridoshic plant, or are there some contraindications with it? And that's where I'm going with it in just a second. But I just want to give a moment of mm, recognition and yeah, like really deep acknowledgement over the fact that you have been balancing that and holding that with the reverence that it deserves. And I'm sure that the goddess of cacao herself is blessing you and removing a lot of the obstacles and making a lot of things possible. It's often I feel, and I mean, instead of being beholden to an investor, I feel like you're working for her, the plant. I'm working for the, you know, the deva that is Ayurveda. I'm working for her. So it's interesting when you have this sacred relationship with something, it guides you. You surrender to it. You don't always know what you're doing. I mean, I'm sure in the early days of starting, you were like, I don't know, I'm just going to figure it out as I go. Same thing with any entrepreneurial pursuit, but oftentimes it can be other people won't understand why it's so important to you to stick to your why. Like no one else is going to get it. No one else is going to be like, oh, okay, you don't want to take outside investors, even though it'd make your life a lot easier in terms of financially. Like financially, you'd have a lot more freedom and wiggle room. But it's like, yeah, but that's not why the core reason of why you started this company isn't that. Even though, yes, money is good. We love it. And we don't want to sacrifice ourselves or the why ever in the pursuit, because if we just wanted to make money, we'd go into finance. We're bringing something else to the world. And yes, it needs to work in the system of capitalism. And yes, there will be, there will be moments of having to really make some difficult decisions, but never at the expense of the core essence of why you're creating this. So I just wanted to say that I really commend you for that. And I hope a lot of entrepreneurial people or entrepreneurs that are in business currently listen to this and feel it's possible. You can do it. It's not easy. Well, I will never promise that. I will never say, oh, yeah, it's easy. Just, no, it's definitely not. And it's not simple, but it is possible. And I love that we can support one another in that. No, we're not going to hand over these sacred plants or lineages over to money in pursuit of money, just for the sake of returns on investment. We're not going to do that. It's just not even on the table. But yes, there are ways of creatively preserving the dharma while being in business.
Yeah, thank you, Sasha. No, that's exactly right. And when I first began working with cacao too, like the cacao that you could buy was gritty, was really bitter. Like it just wasn't something that I could see taking off because it was more like, ooh, okay, I'm gonna have my cup of cacao. It's really intense. And the people offering would be like, drink it as medicine,
Yeah.
or you'd have to add a lot of sweetener to it, which to me though would dilute the experience of just the pure cacao. And so it became a personal challenge to myself too. It was like, how can I make a really delicious cup of cacao with just a single ingredient, and an amazing process, because that way you taste everything that's happened to that cacao from the farm all the way to your cup, so everything has to be of quality for that to be a good experience. And so, yeah, that's still to this day, I challenge myself on that. I think it's the ultimate challenge. There's a lot of shortcuts to take, like adding sugar or adding cacao butter or, XYZ. But to me, it's kind of like the chocolate maker's ultimate challenge is making a really, really good 100%, and being able to make that from a variety of beans. So that's definitely something that I'm proud of. And then it becomes a whole nother challenge to do that at scale, right? Because again, we kind of had to prove ourselves a little bit. A lot of people bash ceremonial cacao. They're like, "Oh, that's just some hippie stuff," like or "Oh, that's just marketing." And like, I mean, I've seen some really bad ceremonial cacao marketing out there. Don't get me wrong, but also there was this like, we've actually proven over the last 10 years that this is a movement that's here to stay, that people really are wanting a relationship with cacao that's meaningful, and that we can massively support sustainable supply chains doing so. Now we're bringing in containers of cacao from networks of thousands of small farmers. And like, is that the easiest way to do things? Not at all, because like the amount of just like social organizing that it takes to take a region of like 300 farmers, and like the meetings you need to have to agree on things, to bring in local ownership, to make sure everybody's well supported, has the agricultural support that they need, weathers challenges that the community faces. But then the social impact that has of supporting that whole region is amazing. And all of a sudden people are like, wait, you're bringing in containers to make ceremonial cacao? Like, we had no idea that this was that big. And it's like, yeah, we are, because we've shown people that it's a quality product too. It's not something where people are taking shortcuts or doing shoddy manufacturing. So the quality has been hand in hand with how we've grown the movement, and then in turn supported the farmers. Like, I would say if we didn't have the quality, the quality was like a key component of doing all of this. And yeah, it's kind of like we've let the universe be our investor. There's been so much magic along the way, like sometimes just a big cacao purchase coming in to pay those bills at the end of the month, or getting approved for a loan. Like, there's just all of these moments that have seemed like miracles. Like, oftentimes we're just like, we're so committed to the path and believe in it, and we don't know how it's going to work out. I've had so many months of being like, I don't know how it's going to work out this month, and it keeps working out. So there's this real aspect to magic that I still, even 10 years in, don't lose appreciation for. And it comes back to, it's like, well, what feeds that magic? It's that practice of, which seems simple, right? But just sitting down with the cacao and being in gratitude, and slowing down enough to listen to it and let it guide.
It's bigger than us. And I think when you trust yourself and you trust that knowing that there is a purpose, there is a mission that you're serving, in the 11th hour, I do believe those miracles just drop in. And who knows how or from where or why. I mean, I think I can infer as to why. It's because it's needed. There's a need in this world for what you're doing. And it gets recognized in very mystical ways sometimes. But there are definitely also moments any entrepreneur will have where they're like, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. No one will ever prepare you for those moments.
It's a spiritual growth path,
Yeah.
right? Like, it'll test you in every way that you're, have something to learn or to grow in. And it's a constant, how are you going to meet this moment? Are you going to meet it from your place of power, or are you going to collapse and believe some story about yourself that's not true?
I hope you have I mean, you must have an incredibly supportive group around you of people that, any moments like that, because we are interdependent. I do believe that anyone, no matter how strong, no matter how connected we are to source and our dharma and everything, sometimes we just need hugs and we need to be told, you're doing great and it's all going to work out. Don't worry, because gosh, taking it all on as the leader, as the CEO, as the founder, it's hard up there sometimes. The climate's different. The stakes are a little, not everyone's
Yeah.
like living with those high stakes.
I tell people I solve the problems that nobody else can figure out how to solve. And I have an incredible team of like, a dozen people these days that solves a lot of problems, but there's still, the big deeper stakes puzzle. There's the long-term strategy and like making really, really big decisions sometimes. But yeah, it's honestly, it's one of my favorite parts of working on Ora Cacao these days is the incredible people I get to work with, and that cacao is brought into my life, right? It's like the, again, the cacao just works its magics and brings like really, really amazing people into the fold.
Mm.
So yes, I do have amazing support, and I'm very grateful for that.
Shout out to them. I know it takes a village.
Hmm.
So, to circle back to the question around how much cacao is the right amount, and some people could easily just, like you were talking about the story about your mom having pots every day growing up. I could see people getting really into cacao to that same exact point of just wanting to sip on it throughout the day. But is there a certain time of day? I mean, I'm going to guess it's probably the morning is better, but walk me through the ideal dosage, and does it depend on the person, and does it, what are all the factors that go into figuring out how much of this is a sattvic amount to have each day?
Yeah.
And also you alluded to how whole cow's milk is not the best adjuvant or the best thing to mix with it. So how do we prepare it in the best way to get the most medicinal? Those are two questions in one, but
Great, that's fine. I'm tracking them. So I personally just prepare my cacao in water. It's the traditional way. The key there is use less water than you think, so that it's kind of a frothy and rich beverage. A lot of people use nut milks and such, but at least for me, just wanting to tune in with just the cacao, the nut milks add a lot of extra creaminess, which is it's wonderful and I'll enjoy it. But from a ritual perspective, I just want the cacao in the hot water. Same with sweetener. I drink my cacao pure most of the time. It's a little bit of training your palate to like realize that chocolate doesn't need to be sweet. If you do sweeten the cacao, I try to keep it 85% or darker. So really just a minimal sweet. Again, you're not going for a sweet experience. You're just going maybe to take the edge off of it so that you enjoy drinking your cup of cacao. And that's actually because the sugar will also interfere with the digestion of the cacao. You can kind of think of your gut as a complex microbiome of lots of different bacteria that process bacteria, yeasts, etc., that process what you put in it. And the sugar eating ones will outcompete the other ones very, very quickly. So you have to keep the sugar at just a trickle if you want the cacao processing bacteria to help you absorb the cacao. So that's actually really, really important. So that's kind of on milk and sweetness. At Oro, we put the daily serving size at zero point 0.8 ounces. That's a lot smaller. I mean, when I got into this, people were recommending 2 ounces of cacao a day, which I think is absolutely insane. Like, yeah, I might have that much if I'm really have the time and space to sit and be present with the cacao. If I have like several hours to actually do a cacao ritual and dance and journal and hike in nature and that kind of thing. But as a more like functional daily dosage, that's where I'll have a lot less. I think it's important. Again, it's very, very different per person. Oftentimes when people first start having cacao, they can have a lot of cacao because the cacao is really nourishing their bodies. It's like the superfood that all of a sudden they're introducing and it's helping restore mineral balances and they're getting a big emotional boost from it. Like it's supporting them in a lot of ways. So they could easily have like an ounce and a half a day. But as that kind of relationship becomes something more long term, it's important to recognize that shift and realize that, oh, actually maybe a smaller amount of cacao is what the body most needs, not making a big of cacao and then making yourself drink it when your body's like, actually that's enough, or just drinking it because it tastes so good, but not actually understanding that it is a stimulant and too much of a good thing's not a good thing, right? I really try to listen to my cup of cacao. We have, different cacaos for different times. Like we have a whole line of different cacaos. I come to different cacaos for different times a year or different just moments personally. So for me, it's not just how much cacao, but also which cacao am I going to work with today and feeling into the appropriate one. I'll take breaks, It's like sometimes I won't have my cacao until the evening and then I'll have a little sip of cacao then. But I'll start my day with the matcha or something like we talked about earlier. And then there's moments where I can just tell my body wants a lot of cacao, is really happy with a lot of cacao. So we'll go through a spurt of having a lot of cacao. And then there's times where it's like, wow, my little cup of cacao is like just a few sips, and that's all I need right now. And I think of it all as just staying in right relationship with it and honing that, listening to it, I think zero point 0.8 ounces is a very safe place to start. Like you could easily drink twice that. You could drink half that, you know? Sometimes people say, oh, I got the jitters after drinking zero point 0.8 ounces of cacao. It's like, okay, you're really sensitive. You just start with half that, you know? But I try not to give a prescriptive approach to it. It's just like
Very
hone your listening
Ayurvedic
skills.
answer. Very Ayurvedic answer. Listen to your body. Depends on the person, depends on the place, time, setting. Yeah, that's how I answer most of my questions when people ask me about a specific medicine of any or food or is this good for you? Well, depends. But knowing that you at one point were partnering with an Ayurvedic center, were you able to learn about the energetics behind cacao in terms of is this a tridoshic medicine? Can anyone with any imbalance, is there a benefit to this for everybody, or are there some contraindications? Or, for some people, is it a matter of, if they're taking medications, or if they have a disease, or if something with their mental health isn't quite fully great at the moment, is this something that could benefit, help them get out of that? Or is it better to begin this ritual with cacao when you're kind of more at like a baseline, you're feeling good? Because I know it is a heart opener, and sometimes with that it can be tricky because it's like, okay, now the heart's opening, and that's of course what we need for healing to be happening. And is everybody ready for that?
Yeah, cacao is enormously beneficial for mental health. Cacao is actually an alternative remedy for mild to moderate cases of depression, for anxiety, as opposed to pharmaceuticals. And I think that's one of cacao's huge, huge potentials in our society that hasn't really been realized yet. Some of the same neurotransmitters and modulators that I talked about earlier, they work on the same pathways that modern Western medications like SSRIs function on. So that's one place to be careful, actually, because if you're on certain pharmaceuticals, cacao is technically contraindicated with those because you don't want to overload those pathways. Like your serotonin pathway only has so much capacity. And if you have a cup of cacao on top of a full dose of antidepressants, that can overload that circuit and give you a really bad headache. Fortunately, that's about like the worst of the symptoms that you'll get. But it's very possible to gradually taper some of those pharmaceutical antidepressants and substitute in cacao because often those pharmaceuticals have other side effects that you don't want. And the cacao is a gentle way of supporting you on those same mental health pathways, but also starting to try and look at those root causes, right? You had mentioned heart opening, like cacao is a holistic medicine. So it's not just addressing the symptoms, it's actually taking into account everything. And so, we have people who have reported getting off of their medicines gradually, like using a tapered approach like that. And they're like, well, how do I feel now? Well, I actually feel a lot more. Like it's a lot to feel all of it, and and I'm so grateful, right? Like it's not it's a choice of like going and doing the work and making time and space for it. So it's like, yes, you do need some amount of resource and time and space to do the work, but when you're ready, it is a really beautiful alternative to some of the pharmaceutical options that we've been given that are more of just kind of a band-aid to like keep going and keep surviving. But life is about more than survival. It's about thriving. And I think cacao really will support that. From a Ayurvedic perspective, I want to have a more in-depth answer to how it works with the different doshas. I think of cacao elementally a lot.
Hmm. Hmm.
Cacao to me is very balanced in that, well, okay, I'm going to say a cup of ceremonial cacao is very balanced in that it has air, earth, fire, and water in it. It actually has those four elements present in the cup, in the cup.
The cup.
Cacao
That's
cup.
there you go. There's
There we
there's a new
go.
tagline for you.
That's where we're getting in deep. It happens after some amount of time talking about cacao. But those elements are actually woven into the cup of cacao four times throughout the process of making the cacao. It's maybe a little bit longer than I have time to get into right now. But to me, that weaving of the four different elements is part of what creates that magic. It's part of what contributes to the ceremony and the ritual of cacao. So, from that perspective, cacao is fairly balanced elementally. I do, sometimes people consume a lot of, say, cacao nibs. And in my perspective, at least from on the manufacturing side, cacao nibs is entirely fire and air. So I see and I feel the energy of the cacao nibs as being like very intense and elevating in that way. So I think having cacao nibs on a regular basis is a lot less sustainable than having from like a body perspective, unless your doshas can handle that.
Yeah.
So again, it really depends on the person. But I know for myself, I need the water and the earth as part of how I relate to cacao.
Mhm. I would imagine that being so bitter, right? It's a bitter taste.
Hmm.
So we immediately think detoxing, purifying. It's great for pitta to an extent. We don't want to over purify, but bitter is the taste that balances pitta, actually. And it's even good for kapha. So the one dosha that I think might need to just be careful about dosage is and the thing is that a lot of people overdo things, like you were saying, too much of a good thing. You just have to know how to listen to your body, and if you're someone that really does have that high sensitivity to anything, right, then you just want to start on a low dose. And I like to actually think about all food as medicine. And it's funny when you were first saying that people have to adjust their palate and their assumptions or expectations around chocolate being sweet. I was going to make a joke around like, "Oh, it tastes bad, that's how you know it's medicine," or something, because we just have this funny relationship with taste, and we in other cultures they're a lot more used to the bitter taste or the
Hmm.
pungent taste. Like in India, oh my gosh, or Mexico, they can have hot sauce, they can have spicy, like,
Hmm.
it's unbelievable. I mean, it's wild. I have I don't have any of that enough of that mucosal lining in my intestines to be able to handle what they're able to handle. It's truly remarkable, but I think, yeah, meeting people where they're at, where and knowing firsthand as an Ayurvedic doctor just how many people are experiencing vata imbalances. It's just we don't want to say this isn't for you, but it's something along the lines of understanding. Again, it's so important to know this is medicine, and at the right dose, it's medicine. Only at the right dose.
At the right dose, and also like what's happening in the rest of your ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
So like so many people are chronically dehydrated. If you're not hydrated with cacao, then you might start feeling a little bit off and you might blame the cacao, but it's actually just your hydration.
Yep.
So like I think that's a key one to pay attention to and get right. Like I'll often tell people drink a cup of water with your cup of cacao
Mhm.
just to bring that hydration piece in. Also, there's advice out there saying have cacao on an empty stomach, and this is like from the perspective of like maximizing the effects and like being able to tune in to the cacao as clearly as possible. And it's like, yeah, I definitely appreciate that advice. But also, like, if I'm going into a busy day and I'm just starting on a day of cacao and skipping breakfast, like, that's also not a recipe for success. Like, I tell people, like, yes, please eat if you're hungry.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
cacao is useful for partial fasting if that's what you're making space for. But also, like, just listen to your body and what it needs. And cacao is not it's not water, it's not food. Like it's a habit and balance. And then more cacao still doesn't make it food or water.
I love that so much that you mentioned, should we have this on an empty stomach or not? That's another huge aspect of what makes something healing versus potentially imbalancing, is knowing, yeah, how to use it. Is it safe to do intermittent fasting and have cacao as the meal replacement? And the answer probably is truly depends on what you've got going on that day. If you have a busy day, that's probably not a recipe for a balanced day. You need fuel. So Yeah, oftentimes I think where a lot of marketing with a lot of amazing things, even with very medicinal things like mushrooms or other, hot trendy products right now on the market like matcha. I think that we just want to streamline and generalize. This is just good for you. This is healthy. Everyone should have this. And to an extent, but if there's no educational aspect, if you're not educating the public about how to really have this be a part of your life in the long term, that's I think where the marketing is missing out. And even with like spices and herbs like ashwagandha, turmeric, it's like this is great stuff. And also, you need to know how to use it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're just throwing more powder into your body, just so maybe this will make me healthier and take my inflammation down. Let's let's empower ourselves with knowledge. I think knowledge is the real key component to intentional ceremonial living
Yeah.
on a
Well,
grander
and where
scale.
does that knowledge come from is like a certain amount of experimenting, right? It's like I consider cacao generally safe. And so it's like given that it's safe, like even if you have way too much cacao or have it at the completely
You're not
like
going to have a
what's the
heart
worst that's gonna
attack.
happen? You're gonna stay up all night, you might get a headache at
Yeah.
some point. Like this happens. But, experiment having cacao with or without food, experiment having it different times a day.
Mhm.
It's like knowledge, like you can listen to me all day long, but like I'm not in your body. I'm not
Right.
in your life.
Right.
And so
Right.
having the knowledge that's coming from your own experience and applicable to you, whether that's with dosage or how you like to relate with cacao ritually, like that's that's the best kind of knowledge right there.
That's the most Ayurvedic answer that I could ever hope for. Just really truly, that's the heart and soul of what I am doing is empowering people to just listen to themselves. You're the healer. You know way more than you think. So
Yeah.
just guiding people back to that. Wait a minute. We often want to externalize this authority on all of the knowledge, and it's like actually you hold a lot of knowledge. Don't underestimate yourself and your intuition and your knowing because you're the one that's in your body. And I love that that's how you answered that. This is a really good closing question, I think. If cacao could deliver one message to humanity right now, what do you believe it would be?
I still delivered a lot of messages, but like fundamentally, I think of cacao as a relational medicine, that relationship is life. Like, and the more that we weave ourselves into relationship with all of the life on this planet, the richer and more fulfilling it becomes. And like say relating with the trees and the birds in our backyard, right? It's like we can step outside on our back porch and like, oh, there's a bird, there's a tree. But it takes a lot more knowledge and listening and curiosity to observe that tree over the course of a full year, over several years, and like notice how it changes and also how it relates with everything around it, right? And it's like what birds like to come to that tree and just began cacao's taught me to just like begin looking at the relationships between everything in the natural world and just getting more curious. And in that like teaching of relational alchemy, I think that extends to how we relate to the cacao itself, how we relate to other people in our lives. Like, just to me, it just brings a lot of curiosity, and there's so much potential in those relationships. Like that's where the magic is. We were sharing something earlier, talking about that like we were talking about that experimentation and like just finding that inner authority and like you finding the medicine and your own knowledge. It's like, well, yes, and you can expand that knowledge with the help of the cacao, right? It's where you have questions, then you can bring it to the cacao. And it's kind of like cacao is this incredible ally and helper to support your expansion. And it comes from a starting place of the heart. And that's the part of the cacao ritual that it's like it's okay if you don't even set intentions with the cacao, but like please come to it with gratitude. Like to me, that's that right there could be a complete ceremony all of itself is just having a cup of cacao and sharing gratitude. Like, go share gratitude for an hour. Have you ever spent a whole hour focused on gratitude? And that can ripple out and be life changing. So, like, fundamentally, cacao, I think, is a teacher of gratitude and of relating in a more nuanced, deeper way.
Well, that's a beautiful place to leave. And Jonas, I am a big fan of your work. I love everything you're doing. I want to say thank you on the behalf of all of us who love cacao, want to have the highest quality cacao. You're delivering it. And I think you're the best at it. And it's because it's not about being like, I know that can have some kind of like ego feel to it, but it's when I say that, I think, again, I can feel the energetics behind the whole operation. And that to me, there is nothing more important in a product than the seed of the why. It all comes back to the intention and the fact that you are doing this at such a high level. And yeah, what you're offering us is just so sacred. And so I just want to say thank you for making it. I love your cacao. Any way I can support you as we continue on this path of life and creation, please, always, always. I would love to offer our listeners just, all this, obviously all this knowledge around cacao and getting to know the founder. I think having that personal connection with Aura now builds that kind of brand connection, really it deepens your connection. And so now all of you who are interested in deepening your connection with cacao, now you know the guy, the real modern day Wonka. We just got to get you the hat and the cane and do a documentary. I'm just going to speak it into existence right now, but I can totally see you with that. Is that what you are for Halloween every year?
It's a gradually evolving costume. Yeah. Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, Sasha. It's been a total pleasure. And it's my honor and pleasure to share cacao with you all in this lifetime.
Thank you so much. Before you go, if you're ready to dive deeper into your healing, check the show notes to book a 45-minute exploratory call with me. If you mention you're a subscriber of the podcast, you'll get 50% off your initial intake consultation. A 2-hour deep dive, normally $400, now just $200. You'll also find exclusive 20% discounts on trusted Ayurvedic herbs from Kerala Ayurveda and Gary & Son. Just click the links to apply the savings automatically. Ojas Oasis is a labor of love, a podcast born from a deep desire to share the timeless wisdom of Ayurveda, Vedic ritual, and holistic healing with seekers around the world. Every episode is carefully crafted to bring you inspiring conversations, ancient insights, and practical tools for living a radiant, balanced life. If the show has nourished your spirit, helped you feel more seen, or guided you on your healing path, you can now support our work by buying us a coffee or golden milk. Your support goes directly toward producing high-quality episodes, keeping the podcast ad-light and mission-focused, expanding our offerings to serve you even more deeply, and whether it's a one-time cup or a monthly offering, we are so grateful. Click the link in the show notes to support the podcast and keep the wisdom flowing.